How is it going, Diablo player? So a lot of people are saying Nightmare Dungeons are not worth it and you shouldn't farm it. I actually gave it a try with the new Goblin event and the results were quite surprising. I ran this for 2 hours and I ended up making more than 23k Obducite per hour. That's actually more than you can make in Infernal Hordes. And yeah, it's less than you can make in Kura's Undercity, but for Kura's Undercity you also need the Tributes of Refinement and you're not always gonna have access to a whole lot of them. But if you play Infernal Hordes or Kura's Undercity, really all you get is Obducite and nothing else. However, by running Nightmare Dungeons, you get a lot of Obducite, but you also get roughly 2 billion gold in materials per hour, which is a lot of boss summoning materials and a lot of rune drops. Furthermore, you know, I'm kind of sick of Infernal Hordes. It's freaking boring if you ask me. And the same goes for Kura's Undercity. I feel like it's very boring. So if you do the Nightmare Dungeons, it's actually not that boring. It's actually interesting. There's a lot of different dungeons you might have never played. And the strategy is kind of always different. It's not always the same, right? So you want to like make sure to hit your elite packs. You get those triple goblin spawns, which are quite juicy. You can also get triple butchers to spawn, which is freaking amazing. And I kind of like it a lot more to actually focus elite packs, bring them down, loot their Obducite, and continue. I ended up having much more fun farming this way than Infernal Hordes and Kura's Undercity. And again, on top of it, I also made much more profit than in Infernal Hordes. So in this video, I will go over this strategy. How do you want to play the Nightmare Dungeons? What events you want to focus on? And I also have like a recommendation which Nightmare Dungeons you want to run. This is not going to be a full tier list, but at least I will give you a list of dungeons which ended up being good for me to run. It's actually quite a bit, and it helps you avoiding those annoying door type dungeons which you really don't want to play. Make sure to check the links in the description down below to the sections. You will also find the link to my Sorceress Tetherford speed farming build there. But now without further ado, let's start with the strategy. And first up is which activities and mob types actually drop how much Obducite. And also at the very end you will find the before after of my 2 hours farming session there. Alright, so what are the main sources of Obducite? So let's start from the low to the high. First of all, random mobs, non-elite mobs can drop 4 to 10, but you shouldn't focus on them. Elite mobs drop 15 each, so usually they spawn in packs of 3, so you get 45 for a pack of elites. Super elites, those are the elites with the 3 elite properties, drop 45. So it's pretty much the same than spawning an elite pack or a super elite pack. Now let's get to the more juicier ones. Goblins spawned by the shrines, or just random goblins in general, drop 100. Resplendent chests sometimes drop 100, sometimes they don't. I would say it's rather 50-50. I don't really know the condition on them, but you know, it's still worth opening the resplendent chest. They can drop up to 100. And now one of the biggest sources is the Butcher. So the Butcher spawned by the Shrine event, also any other Butcher spawned in a Nightmare Dungeon, drops 250. And then, last but not least, the end of the Nightmare Dungeon always spawns 250. So what does that make for our strategy? We want to jump through the Nightmare Dungeon as fast as possible, kill all elites, open all resplendent chests, and activate all shrines and kill the Goblin and the Butcher, and then try to finish the Nightmare Dungeon as fast as possible. However, finishing the Nightmare Dungeon is not the main goal. The main goal is really killing all elite packs or killing elite packs as fast as possible. Obviously, you don't want to go out of your way to find like a single elite pack somewhere at the very outer edge of the map. But usually, on most maps, it makes sense to clear the entire map to kill all the elite packs. So as for the events, either being it Cursed Chest, Cursed Shrines, or the regular events appearing in Nightmare Dungeons, you don't want to run them. They take more than 1 minute to complete and they end up dropping you like roughly 150 to 250 Obducite, which is simply not worth it. Compared to a full Nightmare Dungeon taking 3 minutes is giving you like roughly 1000 to 2000 depending on the dungeon. Also, the resplendent chests spawning at the end of the events do not drop Obducite at all. At least in my tests I didn't find a single chest dropping those. So really don't do these events. If it's shrine events, just kill the Butcher like here and then, you know, just leave the event alone and continue with the dungeon. Don't get tempted to finish these events. It's gonna slow you down significantly for very little rewards. To maximize your boss material farm, you wanna run this dungeons using Seizing Opal of Torment. Since you're killing a lot of elite packs in a very short amount of time, you actually end up getting quite a few rewards out of those Seizing Opals. And well, on top of it, as long as the Halloween event is running, you will get a lot of goblins spawned by the shrines, and these all drop boss materials. And also as a reward for finishing any nightmare dungeons, you get 2 Distilled Fears in the end. Those are actually adding up as well for quite a bit. For the question what dungeon you want to run, first of all, I'm going to put a list on your screen right now. These are dungeons I think which are worth running. And the ones with an exclamation point behind it are the ones which I thought were kind of S-tier dungeons. I tested quite a bit of those. This is not a tier list or anything. This is just dungeons I used to run, and I felt like these have good mob density and good elite density, and they don't have annoying doors and are usually pretty easy to finish and give you a good reward. I felt like the dungeons in the new area are not worth running at all. I felt the elite density is very low, and you're just basically gonna go to the very end and kill the boss, and on the way there you actually not end up making all that much. In general, try to avoid dungeons which have low elite density, try to avoid dungeons which have annoying objectives, try to avoid dungeons which have doors which you have to manually open. And that's pretty much it. And you will also find this list in the description of this video, so you can just copy it out. And I recommend just going to your stash, put Nightmare Dungeons in 1 or 2 stash tabs, and then going through the list, searching them, and actually taking them out of the stash, moving them into your inventory, so you don't have to look for every single dungeon key while you're like sorting. I would highly recommend just use the search function there. So now I'm gonna be running an example dungeon, and I'm gonna do an Uldur's Cave. So right now, as you can see, if we look at our materials, I have 146k. So I don't know how much this is exactly. It doesn't matter. If you really wanna look at the gain, just look at the before, after, at the end of this video. For this, I'm just gonna run one, and we assume it's gonna be 146. And we're just gonna go with the dungeon. And just so you see how fast generally one dungeon goes, I have a timer up. And once we start the dungeon, we start the timer, and we're gonna see how much we're actually gonna make. So let's go. So as you can see, this dungeon took roughly 2.5 minutes. I guess this is a little bit of a cheat since this actually spawned 2 butchers, which is, kind of uncommon. But, for the sake of this just being an example, I guess it's alright. So as you can see, we're at 148k now. So let's just say we roughly made 2k in this dungeon. So make it 1.5k without the butchers. So I guess just for a 2-minute dungeon, that's actually a pretty decent reward. So what we're going to do is now we're going to run 2 hours of Nightmare Dungeons. So I have a list in the description of this video which Nightmare Dungeons are generally good. I didn't really tier them at all, so I really just filtered out the very bad ones which have doors. And as you can see, I have like a bunch of these Nightmare Dungeons in my stash here. They are really not so much assorted. I really just filtered out the very bad ones. So let's see what we have right now, and so we can count what we actually do. So we have 54.4k Iron Chunks, 107k Rawhides, 8.28k Forgotten Souls, and 90.5k Obducite, and we have 38.022 billion gold. We have no runes, no consumables other than ones we are used, and we have no dungeon keys. So what I'm doing is, I'm going to run this for 2 hours. We're going to count the goblins and butchers and everything. And, I'm just going to grab random ones here for now, so it's, not so really inflated. And usually what I do is, I just fill, like, the bottom 2 rows here of my Nightmare Dungeon sigils. And then once I'm done with the bottom rows, I basically salvage everything and continue, so I make sure I don't run like the horrible sigils, right? So, and this way, we're just gonna start now for 2 hours Nightmare Dungeons, and at the end, we see how much buck we're actually gonna make.
Two hours later.
Alright, so we ran Nightmare Dungeons pretty much exactly 2 hours. So let's see what we actually got. So let's just salvage our gear. And let's take a look. So let's start with runes. So we have a total of, I don't even want to count. So I'm just going to put it on the screen right now. But we're going to have a bunch of runes, which, end up being worth quite some money if you sell these on the auction. Then look at boss materials. So we have 40 Malignant Heart, we have 95 Living Steel, we have 207 Distilled Fear, and we have 96 Exquisite Blood, and we have some random summoning materials. So this is also not a shabby result at all. Let's look at the dungeon keys. We got 6 Tributes of Refinement. If we really want to get even more masterworking materials in Undercity, we can do so with these. But now let's go to the most important stuff. So how much Obducite do we actually have? So we have 137k. And that's a total of, I don't know at this point. I'm going to put it on the screen because I honestly don't remember how much here we had before. But I think this is somewhere around 30k per hour. And then, all the other materials. I think the gain here is not really so relevant. And we have like also a good amount of raw gold here.